join.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
Well, I can hear you. Look at all these people. Where are they coming from?
I have no clue.
Must be bored on a Sunday. I don't recognize a lot of them.
I know one of them.
Must have been invited by somebody else because they're all brand new.
Yeah, I must be an apologist because I don't know any of these people.
Me neither. Some of them are from here.
Hello.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Did you invite a bunch of people from a different service? A lot of new people in here.
No, I didn't. But I guess maybe they're interested.
Interesting.
So, it's your challenge, so you can start if you want.
Yeah, and
Just,
to the audience, we're not going to take people up on stage, so don't bother requesting it.
Oh. Yeah, I guess I tried to start the event and accidentally mentioned everyone who was subscribed to the event.
Oh, it's funny.
Well, I'm glad people signed up. Cool. All right, go for it.
Okay, let me first. Okay, first of all, I apologize if I pinged anyone who's not interested. Yeah, but thank you everyone for being here. I'm gonna talk about why I think the resurrection is in fact a historical event. Basically, there are 5 historical events who even critical non-Christian New Testament scholars or historical Jesus scholars, to be more precise, believe to be true. And I believe that if these 5 events are true, then the most logical explanation is that Jesus did in fact rise from the dead. First fact or event is that Jesus was crucified on Friday by Pontius Pilate. This is well attested across tens of documents in the 1st century, some of which were written by non-Christians such as Josephus and Tacitus, and even Bart Ehrman, who is a critic of Christianity, acknowledges that, and I'm quoting here, "For one thing, I am convinced beyond the shadow of doubt that Jesus was physically crucified and died on the cross." So this is not something that just Christians believe in, it's something that everybody who studies history believes in. So second point is that we know that Jesus was buried. We have 5 1st century sources attesting to the burial of Jesus, one of which goes as early as 6 years within the crucifixion. So the 5 sources are the 4 canonical Gospels, obviously, and 1 Corinthians. But 1 Corinthians, we get Paul quote from an oral tradition that he received before believing in Jesus, and therefore we know it's within 6 years of the cross or the crucifixion. Okay? So we see that Jesus is buried in a tomb by Joseph of Arimathea, who's a Pharisee in the 4 Gospels. This poses an embarrassment factor and more of an absurdity factor as well, because we would not expect the people who crucify Jesus to be the ones who bury him as well, and we do not also expect that this poses an embarrassment factor for the writers, because none of the disciples stepped up to have Jesus buried in an honorable way, but rather a Pharisee has to do it. And there are no supernatural elements to the burial story, so even naturalists should not object to it. Third fact, and this is kind of the most debatable, and that's where it kind of goes from maybe 90% of scholars to 75 or 60% of scholars. On Sunday, the tomb of Jesus was found empty. There are the four Gospels attesting to the empty tomb. The Book of Acts, which is the same which is the same date as the book of Luke, as the Gospel of Luke. And in Matthew 28, we see Matthew say that the Jews are lying when they say that the disciples stole Jesus' body. So that indicates that even if Matthew is lying and the disciples truly did steal Jesus' body, the Jews in the first century believed that the tomb was empty. And also, we see Justin Martyr attack the same theory in about 150 AD, which means that this theory was prevalent among the Jews until 150 AD. And finally, the discovery of the empty tomb is done by women in all four Gospels, which poses an embarrassment factor because in the first century, women's testimony were not reliable, and they were even attacked for it. But for the sake of time, I cannot get into that really. How much time do I have left?
50 seconds.
Okay. So basically, yeah, and fourth event is that the disciples of Jesus started having visions of him risen, and the reason I say visions is because they were willing to die for those visions. And the fifth fact, I'm going a bit faster here, is that people who did not believe in Jesus started having similar visions, which include Paul, James, and Jude. They did not believe Jesus was the Messiah, but then after Jesus rose from the dead, they started having similar visions, and they were also willing to die for them.
Cool. Do we want to reset the time and then I can go? Alright, I'll go. So starting now. I think the resurrection of Jesus Christ is a question that would be really hard to answer because all events of the past are not experienced through the individual. So we just have to reference other things that we know are either possible, plausible, and use evidence that we have in the present to validate those past beliefs. So one of my issues with the resurrections of Jesus Christ is I don't even know what it is. So I kind of explain it this way. I understand what an ice cube is, and I understand what a warm thing is. But if someone said there was a warm ice cube in my hand 10 seconds ago, I wouldn't know what they meant. So even though I can understand both of these things conceptually and individually, I can't imagine them together in the past. So I understand what it means for someone to die, and I understand what it means for someone to be alive. But for someone to die and then come back to life seems really impossible to me, even if I can understand it in a conceptual way. So my biggest issue with the resurrection of Jesus Christ is even if I can understand what it means conceptually, I don't know what it would mean in reality. And one of the things that DS tried to explain this is it's a miracle. So when people refer to miracles, it's just again drawn from something that I couldn't possibly understand. So currently in modern times, we have two ways to understand death: is brain death or cardiopulmonary death, which is basically if your heart and lungs shut down and they don't work again. Whenever people say that Jesus was resurrected, they don't actually explain how that he got stabbed in the side, obviously, but they don't ever explain how God revived him. And they use kind of, how would you say, vague language to explain what happened during his resurrection. So I think the two things best to make me believe that the resurrection did occur would be explaining what happened to Jesus to allow him to live again, or to explain what a miracle is. And I think that not being able to do either of these things make it really hard to believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, for all the other things, these are explainable by, I don't like saying just people are lying, but lying and delusions would explain these things a lot better, but I like to go why I don't think the resurrection is explainable in itself. we like to reference all of the writings, but we also have to remember that other historical data is there are about 10 billion people, I believe, something around there, that have ever lived, and we can agree that at least 8 billion of them have died and never ever come back to life. So all 8 billion of those people are a point against someone coming back to life. And that's saying 2 billion people did revive. I think saying that things that happen that are unlikely are miracles aren't a great explanation. They're just unlikely things to happen. And every time something unlikely happens, we don't say it's a miracle. We try to figure out what it is. So for me, I think the issue is that we don't really know what occurred to Jesus to make him come back to life other than saying it's a miracle. And even if it was a miracle, that doesn't necessarily mean God did it. It could just be any other miraculous force, which we also wouldn't know either way. So again, just to repeat, I think the two biggest issues is conceptually, I don't understand what it means for Jesus to come back to life because we don't have really evidence of anyone ever or the entire town of, I think Nazareth came back to life. But they walked around, the entire graves rose up. But in modern times, we don't have anything to reference back to. And then the other thing is, even conceptually, how did it happen? How did God do this? They don't explain that his cells were healed. They don't explain his skin was healed, nothing like that. It's just, it was a miracle. Someone actually brought up the point, why do you believe that, like, the founding fathers from the United States, the founding fathers wrote the Constitution? That seems kind of unbelievable. And I'm like, well, I know what writing is, and I know what a pen is, and even though I don't know what kind of pen they may have used, I know what a pen is, I know what writing is. Nothing, no part of the writing of the Constitution was a miraculous thing. But when we refer to the resurrection of Jesus, it's by definition a miracle, something we don't understand. If someone said God somehow healed his side by, regenerating the cells or something like that, that would be at least a better, more plausible explanation because now we're referencing something that we know can occur and we just don't know how it occurred back then. So that's my points.
Can I start with my rebuttal now?
Yeah, go ahead. We
Okay.
set 5 minutes for this or 10 minutes?
5 minutes. 5 minutes, everything, even the cross-examination.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So there are multiple objections that were raised by Tuakna. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but so first objection is this is something that is kind of that never happens today, that never, but it just happened in the past, and we do not know if it's possible to replicate that today. Well, that by that logic, you would believe that the pharaohs did not build the pyramids because we do not know how to build the pyramids today, but they were built in the past uh, by some way. Second, I get the point that this is something that this is a miracle. It's just a no explanation, and I guess that I'm not saying this is just like a miracle. I'm saying God raised Jesus from the dead. This is actually one of the reasons why I was hesitant to debate on this on the context of atheism, because if we assume God does not exist, then truly it's impossible for Jesus to have risen from the dead. However, if we are open to the possibility that God does exist, then the explanation is not it's a miracle. No, the explanation is God raised Jesus from the dead. And the definition of a miracle is that it's an event that is unexplainable by science and is attributed to a divine entity. So miracles are possible if a divine entity does exist. So miracles are not impossible, but rather, uh, we are rare events. I'm willing to acknowledge that. Second, he said that no one has ever done that, that they've risen from the dead. Well, in my belief system, where Jesus is the Messiah, I do not believe anyone else is the Messiah to to be able to replicate the actions of the Messiah. I don't believe anyone else could walk on water. I do not believe anyone else is God other than God. So this point is just like a false equivalence. And uh, I would like to also add one thing is that I didn't during the whole opening statement I did not get a clear idea what my opponent would consider reliable evidence or acceptable evidence to make him believe in the resurrection. So I hope he can address that in his rebuttal. I want to know what kind of evidence, if presented, would make you believe in the resurrection, if that evidence does exist.
Sorry, just finish up the last of my notes. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, sure thing.
Okay, so we can start backwards. I can respond just to your question. I'll start my time now. So you asked me what is reliable evidence for the resurrection. As far as for my view, I don't think there's any reliable evidence for the resurrection because as it stands, you are defining the resurrection as a miracle, and I don't understand what that is. If you mean what is reliable evidence for Jesus Christ coming back to life, it's possible that Jesus Christ came back to life even without God. I think that is something possible as long as you explain what caused that and what you mean by he died and then came back to life. A lot of Christians have to say that God granted his soul back to his body, but I don't know what a soul is when people say that. So for me, if you said God died by these parameters, I mean there are automated electronic defibrillators. We can shock people's heart back. So if you said to me, God, Jesus' heart stopped working and then his heart started beating again, that would be a way that I believe Jesus Christ rise from the dead. But that kind of ruins the point of it being a miracle. Just for your intro, just really quickly, you said Jesus was crucified, and this is agreed by the fact by even non-Christian scholars and people that weren't Christian wrote about it. I have no issue with saying Jesus was crucified. There's nothing miraculous about Jesus' crucifixion. He was crucified. That's something possible. Nothing miraculous. Buried in a tomb in an embarrassing way. Again, nothing miraculous there. Unlikely things aren't miracles. They're just unlikely things. The tomb was found empty. Again, nothing miraculous here. Again, just an unlikely thing. Disciples had visions. They were martyred. I don't think there's any evidence that they were martyred for their beliefs, but even granting that they were martyred for their beliefs, saying they had visions, I would just need more evidence for that. And I feel like saying people had visions would be how would you say divine revelation, and you'd have to explain what that is to me because I don't understand what people mean when they say they have divine revelation. Um, People that didn't believe had similar visions. It would just be the same thing. I don't know exactly what you would mean that they had visions like that. People see things all the time. You can take certain chemicals right now and see things that aren't there. There's nothing miraculous about that. If you said they had miraculous visions, I would love to hear more about that. We don't know how to build pyramids today. There's nothing miraculous about how the pyramids were built, and we actually can build pyramids today. If you mean how people 100 years ago built pyramids, um, well, more than 100 years ago, a few hundred years ago, there's nothing miraculous about what the pyramids are, and there's no miraculous creation of the pyramids. Every part of the pyramids, we know what it is and how it could be there. We just don't know how people so long ago did it. Um, God raised Jesus from the dead. This is an answer of who raised Jesus, not how Jesus was raised. I still want to know how God did it. I feel like just saying like it's a miraculous event, it doesn't answer what a miracle is. If you said God made a hot ice cube, again, I'm not like I know you're telling me who did it. I just want to know how it's done. It's impossible to raise Jesus from the dead without God. If you mean in a miraculous way, I agree in a miraculous way because, in your view, miracles are only done by God. But if you mean just for Jesus to die and come back to life, there's nothing miraculous about that. As I already explained about someone having pulmonary sensation, that is something to recover from, and we know how it's done. Again, it just you brought up God raised Jesus from the dead. This is who did it, not how it was done. Um, Miracles definition. I would like a definition for miracles. I don't think miracles. I mean, we could do an Oxford definition, but as far as I understand it, miracles are events that can't be explained by the natural world and are attributed to a supernatural entity. That's as far as I understand a miracle. It's just that no part of that requires God. It could just be any other supernatural force. So I don't know why, even if Jesus rose from a supernatural force, it's necessary the Christian God. It could be any other God. 50 more seconds. Miracles are rare events. I don't even agree with that. Obviously, because I don't believe in miracles, but there are a lot of rare events that occur. There are miracles. A shooting star, they're not that rare, but some shooting stars are really rare. They come around like every 76 years. People have fallen out of airplanes and lived. We wouldn't attribute that to Zeus or any other miraculous creator. No one can replicate the actions of God. If you mean that in the sense as humans can't replicate the actions of God, you mean in a supernatural way. We could replicate the actions of God in a natural way, but you wouldn't say those things are the same thing. So I just need to know what miraculous is. And I told you what reliable evidence is. For miraculous events, I would need to know what you mean exactly by a miraculous event. I don't know what, to me, what evidence of the supernatural would look like. But if you told me the supernatural did something in a natural way, I could have evidence for that. You can go. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you for your rebuttal. Now I'm gonna start cross-examining you for 5 minutes. I'm gonna ask questions but not make statements. You're gonna make statements but not ask questions, and then we'll reverse.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So you said that that you do that you do would not believe in the resurrection unless you understand what happened to the body of Jesus on a biological level. Is that what you meant?
We wouldn't believe in the resurrection if it was a miraculous event, because I don't know what you mean by miraculous. But if it was a natural way that Jesus died, and then a natural way that Jesus came back, even if it's a supernatural force, then I could believe in that.
Why does it have to be a natural way that Jesus is brought back when I'm claiming that it's a supernatural event?
So it doesn't have to be a natural way that Jesus was resurrected. I just don't understand what it means to have a supernatural resurrection. Just like I wouldn't understand what it is. Sorry, I can't make claims. That's my answer. If you want me to clarify.
Okay. So you just said that you cannot accept a miracle unless you know exactly what is happening internally. But wouldn't that be equivalent to saying I will not believe that God exists until I understand God 100%, which is impossible because if God exists, he's an infinite entity.
So I don't need to understand God 100%. I would just need to understand how God could exist in the first place. My understanding of existence takes up space and takes up time. That's what I think the universe is. I think that's what existing is. So I just need to know what existing is or possible is outside of those parameters.
I I get that. I'm just saying that you are saying that unless you understand exactly what happened to Jesus's body on a biological level, you cannot accept the miraculous event of the resurrection. When in fact, by definition, the event of the resurrection is a miraculous one, which means that when we analyze it biologically, even if we were to do a test to the body of Jesus after the resurrection, we would probably get very confusing results, even if this miracle was true.
Yeah, so I kind of explained this with the people surviving falling out of planes. I don't think rare things are evidence of supernatural events. Just like if someone fell out of a plane which they hadn't survived, we wouldn't attribute that to Zeus or some other supernatural force. This is why I don't believe in miracles and why I don't think it's reasonable to believe in miracles. We, by definition, can't understand what they are. if I can clarify, I said I personally, and it might be out there, I don't know any evidence of the disciples being martyred for their beliefs in Christ.
Okay, we can end this here, and I'll address it in my time or my open discussion.
Yeah, sure. Alright. Are you sure? I didn't start the timer, so to me, you still have 2 minutes left if you want to run for 2 more minutes.
Okay, 2 more minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, I would say, okay, well, I do not know that what happened to the body of Jesus on a molecular level, but still, I believe in the resurrection based on the historical testimony for it. How would you, as someone who is not a Christian, say that it's possible that Jesus was resuscitated, he didn't die, when all of the historical evidence says that the disciples didn't start claiming that Jesus did rise from the dead until Sunday. So how do you explain this? Until 2 days after his death.
Well, I don't believe Jesus rose from the dead in any way, even in a natural way. But I'm just saying that even if he rose in a natural way, or if he rose, that doesn't mean it was miraculous. So I wouldn't try to explain why people say he came 3 days later and how that could naturally happen. To my knowledge, that can't actually happen. You can't be dead for 3 days in any way and come back to life, to my understanding. So that's, yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that you agree that the resurrection, in the sense that I'm discussing, is truly a miracle and it's not just a natural event. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that's why I don't believe in what you mean when you say Jesus rises from the dead. I don't believe in miracles. Yeah, and I don't think it's reasonable to believe in miracles.
Okay. Okay. So, one other point. What kind of I still don't understand what kind of evidence would make you accept a miracle.
So it feels like a really big cop out to say divine revelation, because as an atheist, I don't believe in that. But I think that would be the best form of evidence if I got personal revelation from God. I'm not saying God owes me that, but that would be the best kind of evidence. Another one would be an incredible change in the laws of the universe as we know them. Currently, we're trying to figure out a theory of everything that explains the four fundamental forces. If we discovered something that goes entirely against the four fundamental forces, I think that would be some reason to like lift our eyes and be like, what's going on here?
Problem with this kind of logic is that I still have time.
No, you're out, but I.
Okay, yeah, that's okay. You can start.
Alright. So my first question is, why do we attribute unlikely events, or why would you attribute any unlikely event to God or to a miraculous cause instead of an unlikely natural event?
I weigh out the evidence. I weigh out all the possible explanations. And when it comes to the event of the resurrection, there are two alternative theories that I'm aware of. There could be more that I'm not aware of. The first theory is the disciples were lying, and this theory is has been recently never been used seriously because people do not go to death for things that they know are false, but rather they could go to death for things that are false, but they believe to be true. So the disciples stealing the body and then claiming Jesus rose from the dead is an old theory, but it's no longer advocated up to my knowledge. The current theory being advocated up to my knowledge is hallucination theory, and and the problem with hallucination theory is that in the Gospels and in First Corinthians, where Paul quotes from an oral tradition before he became a Christian, we see group appearances of Jesus as the risen Messiah. So, in case of group appearances, we do not get group hallucinations. That would be really absurd. And weighing it out as a person who believes on other grounds, not on the grounds that yeah, I'm gonna finish now. Not on the grounds that Jesus rose from the dead, but on other grounds that God exists. I believe that the best explanation is God interfered here and made Jesus rise from the dead.
Can we agree that it's unreasonable to believe in things that you don't even know? Because that's my biggest issue with Christianity and miracles is I don't even know what that would mean. So is it a reasonable thing to say I don't believe in something I don't even know?
I disagree on this point because I believe I know nothing. I do not even know that I'm talking to you right now. I could be hallucinating. So I do not know in the sense of 100% certainty that of anything, but I look at the evidence, I weigh it out, and I say this is the most likely explanation. And I'm looking at the evidence right now while talking to you. I do not have a history of mental hallucinations. And I'm talking to you, and this seems very vivid, and based on it, I'm taking a leap of faith that I'm really talking to you and I'm not hallucinating.
Do we agree that of the 10 billion people that have ever lived on Earth, at least 8 billion of them dying, they're all points of evidence against someone coming back to life? I'm not even talking about Jesus in this scenario, anyone coming back to life.
Well, yes, sure, I agree, but there are two counters I want to say to this. First is Jesus is the only Messiah in the 10 billion years in my belief system. So this doesn't refute it. It just proves that Jesus is special in this way.
Yeah.
Second point is across the history of mankind, we're only familiar with one man who's been struck by lightning twice. Does that refute that he was struck by lightning twice? No, it just means that this is a very unlikely event that only happened to one person in history that we know of.
Yeah, but like I said, I think that would be a great argument, except no part of being struck by lightning is a miraculous occurrence. I think it being miraculous is the thing that kills it for me, and why I think it's unreasonable. I don't think rare things aren't necessarily like it's not impossible for Jesus. I've explained this already. Would you give me your definition of miracle?
Go with the standard definition found in Oxford or Cambridge dictionaries. It's a rare and welcoming event that is unexplainable by the laws of nature and is therefore attributed to a divine figure.
Looking at Oxford, it doesn't say. Oh, it does. Okay. And why would you attach any given miracle to the Christian God, and let's not say Zeus or any other god? Why do you do that personally?
Now, basically, Jesus preached the Christian God, and then Jesus rose from the dead. So God would not raise someone from the dead that they do not approve of. So whatever the divine figure was, they approved of Jesus and they raised them from the dead. So I'm gonna have to assume it's the God that Jesus was preaching, and this is very reasonable to assume that God was pleased with Jesus' preaching. Then He raised him from the dead to prove to everyone this was my son with whom I'm well pleased, despite of his blasphemous claims, because he is truly a divine figure.
My time is up, so we can move on to the next.
Yeah, sure. So basically, I just wanted to ask you one thing. In regards to the day of the resurrection, what do you believe did happen?
I haven't read up on it much, but I'm assuming you mean day of the resurrection. Like, what do you mean by that?
I mean the day, the Sunday where the disciples started having visions of Jesus.
Oh, I don't believe anything like nothing really happened that day. Like people are it's just a story. That's my belief.
You don't believe that the disciples had visions of Jesus?
You'd have to be specific on what you mean. I don't think they had miraculous visions. They could have, had visions of a person that was dead because people hallucinate. But I don't think any part of it was miraculous.
So you're advocating hallucination theory. Is that a correct interpretation of what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that. I'm saying I don't believe they had visions. I'm thinking they just wrote a story. If the case isn't that they wrote a story and they actually had visions, no part of it is miraculous.
But if they did write a fake story, they wouldn't be willing to die for it. Who would imagine making up a lie and then dying for it? Who does that? This is so irrational.
Yeah, people are rational.
Not in that way when it comes to survival. People would not be willing to die for things that they know are false. They would be willing to die for things that they think are true, but when in fact they are false. But they would never be willing to die for things that they know are false. And they were willing to die for proclaiming the resurrection.
Um, Again, I don't know any evidence of the martyrdom for the belief in Jesus Christ. I know that they're martyred. I don't know if there's any evidence that they were martyred for their belief in Christ. But I don't know why you believe it's impossible for people to die for lies they know are lies. A lot of people have died this way in history. A lot of wars. I mean, this isn't an uncommon event. People can die for things they know they're lying about. But that's even besides the point. I'm not sure that there's evidence that the disciples died for their belief in Christ that they thought was a lie. So they might have been martyred, but not for that. Yeah, not for that reason. I just don't know the evidence personally.
Yeah, sure. Allow me to present the evidence. In Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews, we see Josephus testify that James, the brother of Jesus, who mocked him in the Gospel of John and did not believe in him in the Gospel of Mark, James, the brother of Jesus, was stoned for blasphemy. So the best, and according to later sources, stoning for blasphemy is just because they wanted to convict him because he kept proclaiming Jesus is God, and they stoned him to death for that proclamation because he was the leader of the church in Jerusalem, and the Jews stoned him to death. Peter, according to Clement of Rome, another first century source, was martyred for his belief. Later sources tell us that he was crucified upside down. Paul, another apostle who was, according to Clement of Rome as well, was martyred for his belief that Jesus rose from the dead, and we get that he was from later sources that he was stoned to death by Roman Emperor Nero. Beheaded by Roman Emperor Nero.
Yeah, I mean,
so the argument is saying that there is no evidence that the disciples truly were martyred is just an argument out of. Yeah, I'm just clarifying. No, there is evidence that they were martyred, and they were willing to die for that. And we even have testimony for James, the brother.
Yeah, I said that's totally possible. I agree.
Yes, how do you explain this then?
Yeah. So again, I don't see why there's no reason people couldn't die for lies. I felt like it was a really big cop out, so I try to think of some examples. People go to prison all the time, even though they know they're lying, that they committed a crime. Some people are just prideful. I think we can all agree that's a thing that happens. Some people die in prison and stuff like that, even though that they were lying about them being innocent and all of that. People do die for lies. This isn't an uncommon thing. So that would be my first response. My second would just be it is possible that they really did have visions. None of these things are miraculous, though. Them dying isn't miraculous. None of these are miraculous events. I can grant you all of these, and it wouldn't make a difference on miracles not being a thing. I don't know what that would be, so that would be my stance on it.
Well, I'm gonna respond to your first point, which is that that they could be lying but then go to death. I think I don't think you understand what it means. Or not that you don't understand, that we're miscommunicating on what it means to die for a lie. You said that if someone knows that they are innocent but goes to prison and dies there, then they died for a lie.
They're guilty. Sorry, they know they're guilty.
They know they're guilty and they go to prison?
Yeah, people know they're guilty. They committed a crime and they say, I'm innocent, and court, they go to prison and die.
Yeah, but were they willing to be put to death if they were found to be lying? You do not know that.
Say that again?
Were they willing to be put to death for this lie? So, for example, if someone came to them and put a gun to their head and said to them, either you admit you're guilty right now or I shoot you, would they be say, shoot me, I will not admit that I'm guilty?
Some people get death sentences because they commit crimes so bad and they still plead innocent, even though that they're lying and they're guilty and they die for
yeah, they're lying because they want to escape death, not that they go to death knowing that unless they stop lying, they will die.
Yeah, but if you plead innocent, sometimes you get a lighter sentence on, like, that's the thing, you can trade, you know.
I don't think this is a fair equivalence. I don't think this is a fair equivalence because we also see that uh, that, for example, when it comes to Apostle Peter and John, they got imprisoned, told, "Do not preach about Jesus."
We are a little bit over the 5 minutes. I'm totally okay with continuing on, but just
no, we're in the open discussion, by the way.
I know it's been 5 minutes for the open discussion.
Yeah, the open discussion I made it 10, I think.
Oh, I thought you said 5 minutes for all. Okay, yeah, we got.
Except the open discussion, of course, okay. 5 minutes each.
Yeah.
So basically, the problem is that we see John and Peter get imprisoned, and then they are told, "Do not preach about Jesus again, because if you do, we'll imprison you again." And then they go and preach about Jesus again without a care in the world. So this shows that they really do not care what happens to them as long as they preach the message. This shows that they truly believe the message is true. It could be false, but they believe
it's true. But no part of that is miraculous. That's fine. They could really believe it. Like I said, you can hallucinate right now, and you really, when you dream, you don't even realize.
Yeah, I just want to agree. I just want to agree that you're advocating hallucination theory.
No, I'm saying my belief right now, because I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to grant you things. I'm saying my belief is that it's just a story. It's just like right now what I think you're doing is hearsay, but that seems really weird to say. So I believe it's all just a story. I'm saying let's grant you that because I don't want to call people liars. Let's grant you that none of that points to God rising or Jesus rising in a miraculous way. Do you understand what I'm saying now?
But I think it would be useful for you to if you want, you can write down my sources. You can look them up after the debate to verify that I'm not like lying to you or anything. You can check Antiquities of the Jews, the letter of Clement of Rome, where he mentions the martyrdom of Peter and Paul. And you can read the book of Acts where it mentions the martyrdom of James, the brother of John, and the imprisonment of Peter and John, and multiple times where Paul was whipped, stoned, etc. So I would like you to check out these first century sources for the events that I'm mentioning, because I feel you do not trust these events without seeing the sources for yourself, and therefore you cannot accept those.
Yeah, that is normally I would read up on it before believing in it. Can I ask you a question, and then I think you'll ask me the first question, and then we can finish off because we only have like 2 minutes left.
Okay.
What is something that would make you, or what do you think is like? Is there anything in your opinion that isn't evidence for God directly or indirectly?
What do you mean by isn't evidence for God?
Yeah, so I think a really good thing is, and I think my lack of belief in God is probably one of the most dogmatic. I'm the most dogmatic about that. It's one of my most dogmatic beliefs that I'm pretty stubborn on it, right? And I think this is probably not great for me. But I like to like play a little game in my head where I try to justify it because it's like, oh, well, the people you're talking to also don't think there's anything that isn't evidence for the opposite, so it's fine. But I asked everyone that I debate this on: is there anything that you think isn't evidence for God, directly or indirectly?
Evidence? Do you mean evidence for the absence of God?
No. I mean like you would say that Jesus' resurrection is evidence for God, and and you would say the fine tuning of the universe is evidence for God, and the fact that we have consciousness is evidence for God. Is there anything in this world that you think isn't evidence for God?
A lot of things are not evidence for God. For example, one thing that I do not consider to be evidence for God is the fact that the God that the world has a lot of evil in it. This is something that I do not believe is evidence for God, but rather evidence of free will. So this is, and this could be uh, discussed separately. But yeah, a lot of things are not evidence for God. For example, the problem, the idea that people are that there is a lot of evil in the world and suffering. So I do not believe.
Really quickly, what did you say? What did you say? Free will though is evidence for God.
Yeah, yeah. I would free will is evidence for God. I
So
would
you
say
do.
on some level it is evidence for God, but I do not. But even if yeah, I get your point now. Now I get it. So that's a good point. I believe God puts it very well in the Book of Revelation when He says, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last." God is everything. You cannot find anything that you cannot somehow trace back to God. But still, you cannot attribute everything to God. You get that? Like when we think of it, uh, we think of the universe in a way that is similar. We all believe that we came out of the universe regardless whether there was a divine intervention or not.
Yeah.
And everything in the universe could be traced back to the universe. But does that mean that everything I do is on the universe? No, it just means it could be traced back to the universe.
What do you mean everything you do is actually never mind. We won't get into that. We can have another discussion.
No, no,
Do you?
sure, sure. I don't mind continuing if you want, or we could do it on a voice chat.
I mean, we're all already here. So
Okay.
we'll keep with just us for 5 more minutes, and then I think a lot of people want to talk to either
Yeah,
us or each
I see
other.
a lot of questions.
Yeah, so that we can hop into voice chat, and then we can do
Yeah.
it that way. So then we'll get a little more chaotic, but it should be fun. So I think the reason that everything can be traced back to the universe is because, as my definition goes, everything is in the universe. Everything that exists possesses space and time. But I would like to be a little honest and try to give an example that I think isn't evidence for naturalism. Just because I asked you, so I feel like it's fair that I answer the question. I think the best evidence, if there was something supernatural or an overseer or creator, is our ability to remember things, or at least move through time. So I'm a believer in the B theory of time. If you want to look it up, like Lorentz transformations, Einstein's theory of special relativity. Basically, it's that all things exist in time at one point, but we just flow through it. So as if you imagine time as a pool, we're swimming through it. We can only swim in one direction with the current, but all particles of the water exist all at once. Um, but I think the fact that we can remember things, or we can imagine the past and we can predict the future, is almost completely inexplainable from a naturalistic stance. There are some things that can explain it, like I brought it up earlier. Dreaming is kind of a weird thing where we really think things exist when they don't, or imagining things. Like I can imagine what my parents look like right now and what they're wearing, but that doesn't actually exist. Same thing with dreams. We really think they exist, but they actually don't. So my best explanation for it is perception is something very similar to that, where we just really imagine things, but they're not actually there. Um, but yeah, that's my take on it.
I want to just make it clear that we can also trace this back to the universe because you believe that you evolved from a singular celled organisms which came from the universe, and therefore your consciousness in itself and your memory can be traced back to the universe. But that's okay. We can start
No,
getting.
yeah, definitely. But I just think
Yeah,
that's super unlikely from the universe. Like that's a really weird thing. Like
yeah,
how could that
exactly.
be possible? Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I got it.
Even if the brain can be explained by the material world, the processes of the brain don't really you can't really seem to explain it. So even if I know I can't dream without a brain, the fact that I have a brain doesn't really help explain what dreaming is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna
So
take the
yeah.
first question. Yeah, I invited the first questioner. Yep.
Okay, so are we still on the topic of did Jesus rise from the dead?
Yeah, sure.
If you have a question, go ahead.
But just make it clear who the question is for.
My question is for you, Christian apologist. Why?
Sure.
What evidence do you have that suggests with some extent of certainty that Jesus actually rose from the dead?
What do you mean? What kind of evidence? Is there any part of my opening statement particularly that you would like to critique, or would you? Because I think this is like me repeating everything I said in the debate. So is there?
No, it's not. It's not. Because I want to actually ask you a real question. Do you know of any sources outside of Christian that indicate anything about Jesus rising from the dead?
Non-Christian sources indicating Jesus rising from the dead?
Yes.
Okay, so basically this is one of the common objections to the historical event of the resurrection, is that all the people who narrate the events are Christians. But the problem with that logic is that if we assume that someone who isn't Christian narrates the event of the resurrection, that would be weird, wouldn't it? Because they would be saying, Jesus rose from the dead, but I still did not believe in him. That would be really weird.
It would be very weird, yeah, I agree, but that wasn't really the question.
In fact, let me just clarify. In fact, we have something like that, but we believe it's an interpolation because it's weird, which is the testimony of Josephus calling Jesus the Messiah and saying that he rose from the dead. This is obviously an interpolation because Josephus was a Jewish man. So if he was Jewish, believed Jesus rose from the dead, this is a contradiction to his identity. You get that?
It's not only that it was not narrated by other people that aren't Christian. It's just that the only accounts of ever seeing him after his death were all Christian accounts. You think that that the chances of that isn't that kind of retarded? Like someone that was people besides Christians would have saw him.
I get that, but I think the problem is everyone who saw him converted to Christianity. But there were
That's the most retarded argument I've ever heard.
Sir, I'm speaking calmly, so please try to be calm. So, sir, what I'm saying is Paul was not Christian, but when Jesus appeared to him, he converted to Christianity. James mocked Jesus, did not believe Jesus was the Messiah, but when he saw Jesus rose from the dead, he believed and he converted to Christianity. But does that mean that everyone's testimony is unreliable because of that? No, because these people like Paul and James, they admit that they did not believe Jesus. In fact, Paul admits that he persecuted those who believed in Jesus. So there is no reason for him to do such a claim. Plus, like I mentioned, there is the empty tomb that is historically verifiable. And
no, it's not.
Wait.
How so?
Wait.
It's not historically verifiable. There is no known tomb or any known remains of Jesus' body. There's nothing.
Oh, I said it's historically verifiable, not archaeologically verifiable.
It's not historically verifiable. It's all Christian.
We're not doing we're not doing the. If you want, I mean, he has an open challenge. You should totally accept. But if you got your question, do you think you got your question answered or no? Even if you don't like the answer.
I'll just say I got the answer because I'm not going to get a real answer anyways.
Is it? This is more for Athena because she's modding right now. Is it okay if I make a comment about Baret's question or no?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I think in like a proper formatting of what the question would be, it would be some kind of maybe Christianity is suffering from a survivorship bias. So where the what would you say the selection process of the information that is gained to us is, or the people that are writing it down, basically the selection process is seeing Jesus risen, and everybody that doesn't convert just maybe didn't write about it. Why don't we see the people who didn't convert and didn't think Christian apologist is just saying that it's just an occurrence that happens when people see that they instantly convert it because it's just such substantial proof that there is no way to be not like there's no way to not be converted after that. So even I understand what your question is, Mirab, but it's just like it is a reason. Like even though I don't agree with it, I understand what Christian apologist is saying. It's just the fact that why would we see anyone like we wouldn't see anyone go to Mount Rushmore and say there's no faces on the side of the mountain, even though we never ever see faces on the side of mountains. We do in that one rare case, and everyone who goes to Mount Rushmore says they see faces on the side of the mountain, just because there's no way to go to Mount Rushmore and not say that you've seen faces on the side of the mountain, even though it's super unlikely. You get what I'm saying?
I kind of get what you're saying, but I just don't. I mean, it's not in any way reliable though. Like
I agree.
you can't
That's why.
say that.
Yeah, I agree with your. I agree with your objection to it, but I'm just saying that's like what Christian apologist is. So even though it's so unlikely for someone to resurrect, and it's so unlikely to see faces on the side of a mountain, if it were true that there were faces on the side of a mountain, and if it were true that Jesus was resurrected, we would never ever expect to see someone say that isn't the case, right? Like, believe me, I understand the objection. I'm just saying that's
How about we take the next question?
Yeah, yeah.
Really sure.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, so I don't exactly have a question, but I want to point out some things that I think are problematic on Christian.
We're gonna jump in the voice chat after, so you can like talk about it. But we do want to do all the questions now, and then we can run it after. Okay?
I think what I have to say is still valid, like here, because
yeah, but
like, I'll say what I have to say at the end. Are you up to that?
Okay. Okay. If you have an objection you want to bring to my attention, maybe I could try to respond to it quickly. We can do that. Sure.
Okay. So my main objections are on the things on the apostles resurrecting. You are right. There are claims. Oh, sorry. On the apostles being martyred. There are claims that they were martyred. The problem is there are multiple claims on the same apostles being martyred on different places in different times. So I posted an article on the chat about this if anyone wants to check out. But yeah, that basically would mean that it was a folklore. Oh yeah, sure. Maybe one of the stories are true, but then all the other fake would be fake except one of them.
Okay. Yeah. Now I get your objection. And that, do you have a follow up or is that it?
No, I have other objections.
Okay, can I let me respond to this objection, and then maybe we can do the rest in the voice channel. How about that?
Okay.
So this objection, well, I do not know what sources you're using, but I only used first century sources. When you narrow it down to first century sources, you do not see any contradictions. Okay, you only see Clement of Rome mentioned that Paul was martyred in Rome. Uh, I don't remember where Peter was martyred, but but it's also mentioned by Clement of Rome. James, the brother of Jesus, was martyred in Jerusalem. So was James, son of Zebedee, or brother of John the Beloved. He was martyred in Jerusalem in 44 AD. So these martyr accounts, when you get to the first century, they all become consistent. But I guess later, some accounts or some legends get made up that are not true and are recorded somehow, maybe in certain churches' traditions as legendary accounts or whatever. But yeah, they're not as reliable.
Can I ask you a question then?
Sure.
Okay, so if you accept all those other accounts of them being martyred as fake, and you only accept the first century ones, is it a possibility that the first century ones are also fake, that they were also made up, or is that impossible?
Well, there is an idea called the gap between an event and its attestation, and whenever this gap gets smaller, the more trustworthy the event is. So the fact that Clement of Rome was writing within 20 to 30 years of the martyrdom of Paul and Peter gives me great confidence that there was no time to make stuff up while people who were eyewitnesses were literally still alive.
Okay, so can I ask a further question?
Sure.
Wait, can we just go?
Sure, but in the voice channel.
Yeah, voice channel. Yeah, we're gonna go to the next person.
Okay. I don't think there's a next person. Anybody have a question, or should we close it?
I have questions.
Yeah, we're literally gonna hop into the religion voice channel in like 10 seconds. So I thought that was super fun. I got a few things to read, which should be super awesome. And anytime you want to run it again on stage or in the voice channel or even in DMs, I'd be totally down.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. And I respect you for being polite throughout the whole debate.
Yeah, of course. See you in the voice channel.
Yeah, let's go to religion.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. We'll see you there.
Okay, so that was brought to you by Christian apologist, and the person goes by the handle of 2Akna. And that topic was, did Jesus rise from the grave? The individual 2Akna I debated before, and this time the individual seemed to be much more, how can I say, maybe more intellectual. I don't know, when I interacted with him, he was inebriated or under some type of physical condition that altered his demeanor, but he seemed to carry himself pretty better, much better during this interaction. And of course, Christian apologist, I interacted with him on the topic of the Holy Spirit. So, any of you guys have any questions about what you just heard or anything else? Send those questions to J.TALKS@yahoo.com. Once again, this audio is brought to you by Modern Day Debate or Discord.